possibly, yes.
She's a rhythm shooter. She starts feeling a couple go in.
They called it the pinnacle of women's basketball, the WNBA Finals. Two elite teams, championship glory on the line, MVPs in every position. And yet, when A'ja Wilson and Diana Taurasi stepped onto the court, they were met not with roaring crowds, but with rows of empty seats stretching into the rafters. A stark, undeniable symbol of a league in crisis. What should have been a celebration became an indictment. The finals exposed a brutal truth the WNBA could no longer ignore. Its success had never been self-sustaining. Without one player, Caitlin Clark, the arena looked hollow.
Cup final today in the W. You see no Caitlin Clark's out with a groin injury for the third straight game for the Fever as they take on.
The hype evaporated, and the fragile facade of progress cracked wide open. What happens when the league's future hinges on a single talent? And what does it say about the state of women's basketball when the spotlight goes dark in the sport's most important moment? Our WNBA exposed as game day approached for the WNBA Finals, anticipation should have been building to a fever pitch. Two historic franchises preparing to battle for a championship. The Las Vegas Aces bringing their defending title and one of the most dominant players in league history. The Connecticut Sun arriving with their own stars and a hunger to finally break through. Every ingredient for compelling drama was present. The storylines wrote themselves. This should have been appointment viewing for anyone who claimed to care about women's basketball. Then fans started checking ticket prices, and confusion turned to disbelief. Championship game tickets were available for as little as $30. Not nosebleed seats hidden behind structural columns. One in actual good seats with clear sight lines to the court where history was supposedly about to be made. $30 for a finals game. The number became a punchline that spread across social media within hours.
Player made an average base salary of $9.7 million. That's a huge pay disparity. It has been a long-standing challenge.
People who had never watched a WNBA game in their lives were sharing screenshots and asking how this was possible. How could the championship of a professional sports league be valued less than dinner at a mid-range restaurant? The pricing reflected a brutal market reality. Demand simply was not there. Despite months of coverage positioning the WNBA as a league on the rise, despite endless articles about growth and momentum and mainstream breakthrough, the actual paying audience for finals basketball had evaporated. Ticket sites showed availability across every section of every arena. Premium seats that should have been sold out months in advance sat waiting for buyers who never materialized. The secondary market that typically inflates championship prices had collapsed entirely. Resellers who bet on demand were desperately trying to unload inventory at losses. Industry observers pointed to the obvious factor that league executives refused to acknowledge publicly. Caitlin Clark was not playing. The Indiana Fever had been eliminated before the finals.
To the WNBA now, and Fever star Caitlin Clark will not play in tonight's game on the road against the New York Liberty.
And with them went the massive audience that had followed every moment of Clark's rookie season. Her games had consistently drawn television ratings that dwarfed anything the league had seen before. Arenas that struggled to fill seats suddenly sold out when the Fever came to town. Merchandise sales exploded. Social media engagement skyrocketed. All of it tied directly to one player who had somehow made women's basketball must-see entertainment for millions of casual fans. Without her, those casual fans disappeared. They had not converted into general WNBA supporters. They had not developed loyalty to the league or interest in other teams. They followed Clark specifically and had no intention of watching basketball she was not playing in. The finals exposed this dependency with brutal clarity. All that regular season momentum had been built on a foundation that vanished the moment its central figure was eliminated. Finals in the void. A'ja Wilson had worked her entire career for moments like this. Years of grinding through seasons when nobody was watching. Years of fighting for recognition that never came. Years of believing that excellence would eventually be rewarded with the attention and respect the sport deserved. She arrived at the finals as the league MVP, one of the most dominant forces in women's basketball history.
Elevates and drops it in over Kalani Brown's extended arm.
Ready to defend her championship in front of what should have been an electric crowd. What she found instead broke something inside her. During warm-ups for Game 1, Wilson looked up from the court and scanned the arena. Section after section of empty seats, red cushions visible everywhere the camera turned. A championship atmosphere that felt more like a regular season game against a struggling opponent. The woman who had carried her team all season, who had performed at a level few players in any sport ever reach, was preparing for the biggest game of her life in front of a crowd that looked embarrassingly thin. Guys, she muttered the words that would define the entire series. This is the finals. The disbelief in her voice was unmistakable. This was not arrogance from a star who expected worship. This was genuine shock from an athlete confronting the gap between what she had earned and what she was receiving. Diana Taurasi processed the same reality with characteristic directness.
Scoring leader, Diana Taurasi.
Going for that 50-50 ball.
Taurasi!
One of the greatest players in WNBA history, a veteran who had seen the league through every phase of its existence, looked at those empty seats and understood exactly what they meant. All the talk about growth and progress, and finally being taken seriously, evaporated in the face of visual evidence that could not be spun or explained away. The league's biggest showcase was drawing crowds that would have been considered disappointing for a mid-season Tuesday night game. During her post-game interview, Taurasi did not hide behind diplomatic non-answers.
The GOAT is with Holly.
Well, there's about 4 seconds left in the game, and your bestie, Sue Bird, rises up for a three.
Her words carried the weight of someone who had sacrificed years waiting for this moment. You work your entire career for moments like this, and you just hope people care enough to show up. That single sentence captured decades of frustration, the endless fights for better conditions, better pay, better coverage, better respect. All of it supposedly building toward a future where women's basketball would finally command the attention it deserved. And here was the championship, the pinnacle of everything the league represented, playing out in front of scattered fans who could not fill an arena that was not even particularly large. The contrast with the regular season was impossible to ignore. When Caitlin Clark played, when arenas sold out and television ratings spiked, social media exploded with highlights and debates and viral moments. Mainstream sports coverage actually paid attention, but the finals without her generated almost nothing. Social media engagement was flat. National coverage was minimal. The game clips that usually spread across platforms disappeared into algorithmic irrelevance. It was as if the entire sports world had decided the championship did not matter. 96% no-show. The numbers told a story that no amount of institutional optimism could dispute. When polls asked fans whether they would be watching the finals, 96% said no. 96%. A championship series between two excellent teams with legitimate star power and historical significance was being rejected by almost everyone who had paid attention to the league during the regular season. The 4% who said yes were treated almost as curiosities, brave souls willing to watch something the overwhelming majority had already dismissed. Those poll results circulated widely and became their own form of viral content. Not because people were celebrating the finals, but because the rejection was so total that it seemed newsworthy. Sports commentators who typically focused on other leagues suddenly found the WNBA interesting again.
Our Rich Nye joins us live tonight, where the announcers were just named the best in the WNBA. Hi, Rich.
But only because the failure was dramatic enough to attract attention. The story was not about championship basketball. More, the story was about a league that had fumbled its biggest moment so completely that the collapse itself became entertainment. The correlation with Caitlin Clark's absence was undeniable. During the regular season, her games had drawn television audiences that shattered every previous record. Fever games consistently outperformed the rest of the league combined. Road arenas that had struggled with attendance for years suddenly sold out when Indiana came to town. The economics were clear. Clark was not just popular. She was the primary engine driving fan interest across the entire league. Speculation about what finals ratings would have looked like with Clark participating became its own genre of commentary. People estimated that tickets would have started at $300 minimum if the Fever had advanced. Courtside seats might have reached $5,000.
Sky faced off against the Indiana Fever right here in Chicago today.
The arenas would have been packed with energy that matched the stakes. social media would have been flooded with moments and debates and the kind of organic buzz that cannot be manufactured through marketing campaigns. None of that materialized because the player fans actually wanted to watch had been eliminated. This created an uncomfortable dynamic that league officials desperately wanted to avoid discussing. The WNBA had spent years building institutional narratives about team parity, rising stars across multiple franchises, and a league-wide product deserving attention regardless of which specific players were involved. The finals exposed those narratives as aspirational fiction. The audience was not interested in the WNBA as an institution. They were interested in Caitlin Clark. You had to remove her and remove the audience. It was that simple and that devastating. The marketing failure league executives attempted to frame the finals as a clash between historic franchises with compelling storylines worth following. The Aces defending their championship, the Sun pursuing their first title, veteran stars seeking legacy-defining moments.
Making All-Star game last night, Team Clark versus Team Collier was the highest-scoring WNBA All-Star game.
Young players emerging on the biggest stage. On paper, the marketing hooks were obvious. In execution, nothing connected with the audience the league needed to attract. The fundamental problem was not marketing creativity or media spin. The fundamental problem was that the league had failed to cultivate transferable interest. Fans who showed up for Caitlin Clark had not been converted into general WNBA supporters. And they had not been given reasons to care about other teams or other players beyond the single star who initially captured their attention. When that star was eliminated, those fans simply stopped watching, rather than transferring their interest to whoever remained. This represented a catastrophic missed opportunity. The regular season had delivered the largest audience in WNBA history.
Everybody loves a winner, and tonight the Atlanta Dream set the record for the biggest crowd to watch a WNBA game.
Millions of new viewers had been introduced to women's basketball for the first time. The potential to build lasting relationships with those fans existed at a scale the league had never experienced. But converting casual interest into sustained fandom requires intentional effort. It requires giving fans reasons to care about the broader product, introducing them to other compelling figures, creating narratives that extend beyond any single player. And the league had not done that work. Instead of leveraging Clark's popularity to elevate the entire sport, much of the coverage and institutional energy had focused on controversies surrounding her presence. Veteran players who should have been positioned as additional reasons to watch instead became associated with hostility toward the new audiences Clark attracted. The atmosphere around women's basketball during the regular season was often contentious rather than welcoming. Fans who showed up because of Clark frequently encountered messaging that suggested they were not real supporters. The finals revealed the consequences. Those fans had been given no reason to stay once Clark was gone. They had not been introduced to A'ja Wilson as someone worth following independent of her opponent. Or they had not developed appreciation for Diana Taurasi's historical significance.
Follow is good for Diana Taurasi.
Or the Connecticut Sun's championship pursuit. They had been treated as temporary visitors whose interest did not really count, and they behaved accordingly by leaving the moment their reason for visiting disappeared. The divided court. The empty arenas exposed something deeper than marketing failures. They exposed a cultural divide within women's basketball that had been festering all season. Veteran players had spent months expressing frustration about the attention Caitlin Clark received. They complained about coverage they considered disproportionate. They questioned whether fans who only showed up for one player were genuine supporters of the sport. They created an atmosphere that suggested new audiences were unwelcome interlopers rather than valuable additions to the community. Those attitudes had consequences. Fans pay attention to how they are characterized. When veterans dismiss new supporters as bandwagon followers who do not understand real basketball, those supporters receive a clear message about whether they belong. When players express irritation about crowds that only show up for one star, those crowds learn that their presence is resented rather than appreciated. The hostility may have felt justified to athletes who had worked for years without recognition, but it poisoned the potential for converting temporary interest into permanent fandom. Diana Taurasi's post-game comments about deserving crowded arenas.
It's just been so great for the game of basketball, men's or women's, really. She set the standard so high.
And experiencing energy sparked immediate debate precisely because the context was so charged. Some fans sympathized completely. Of course, championship basketball deserved packed houses and electric atmospheres. Of course, veterans who had given everything to this sport deserved recognition for their excellence. The frustration was legitimate, and the disappointment was earned. But other fans pointed out the contradiction. Many of the same veterans expressing frustration about empty finals arenas had spent the regular season complaining about the new fans who could have filled those seats. They had dismissed the audience Clark attracted as less authentic, less knowledgeable, less deserving of consideration. And now they were upset that audience had not shown up to support a championship series featuring players who had been dismissive of their presence all season. The criticism wrote itself. You cannot spend months telling fans they do not matter, and then expect those fans to appear when you need them. The division had real costs. Energy that should have gone toward building the sport instead went toward internal conflicts that alienated potential supporters. Coverage that should have celebrated women's basketball instead focused on controversies that made the league look petty and unwelcoming. Momentum that should have carried through the entire season instead dissipated the moment the player driving it was eliminated. The finals revealed what happens when a league allows cultural divisions to fester rather than healing them. The rookie effect. The WNBA faced a reality it had spent years desperately trying to avoid confronting.
I think we really settled down on the defensive end, and that's where we can really play our basketball.
The league's appeal remained heavily concentrated around individual personalities rather than institutional loyalty. When those personalities were present, interest surged to historic levels. When they were absent, interest collapsed so completely that championship games could not fill arenas even with $30 tickets. The finals proved what executives refused to say publicly. Even the highest stakes competition in women's basketball could not generate sustained attention without the specific stars audiences actually wanted to watch. This dependency created existential questions about the league's entire future. Building sustainable growth requires developing multiple compelling figures across multiple franchises. It requires creating reasons for fans to tune in, regardless of which specific players are participating on any given night. It requires institutional appeal that transcends individual careers and survives the inevitable transitions when stars retire or get injured or simply have off years. The WNBA had none of that foundation. It had Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, she's displaying some skill right now that's like...
And when she was not playing, it had empty arenas and championship tickets treated like clearance merchandise that still could not find buyers. The veterans understood this truth even if they resented it deeply. Their frustration during the finals was not simply about attendance numbers or respect they felt owed. It was about confronting undeniable evidence that their excellence alone could not command the attention they believed they deserved. They had performed at the highest level for years. Only they had won championships and set records and played basketball as beautiful as anything the sport had ever produced. A'ja Wilson was a legitimate MVP candidate by any measure.
The two-time WNBA MVP, A'ja Wilson, joined us here on SportsCenter. A'ja.
Diana Taurasi was one of the greatest players in league history. Neither of their names could fill seats the way a rookie from Indiana could without even trying. That reality stung in ways that went beyond professional disappointment. These were athletes who had sacrificed years fighting for recognition that never came, who had watched the league struggle through decades of minimal coverage and empty arenas and constant questions about viability, who had believed that excellence would eventually be rewarded with the attention and respect the sport deserved. And here was their championship moment, the culmination of everything they had worked toward, a playing out in front of scattered crowds while the sports world collectively shrugged. The path forward remained painfully unclear. The league could continue pretending the problem was fixable through better marketing or adjusted ticket pricing or increased media coverage. It could blame fans for not appreciating the product being offered. It could express frustration about audiences that only materialized for one player and disappeared when she was eliminated. But none of those responses would change the fundamental dynamic the finals exposed with such brutal clarity. The WNBA had accidentally become dependent on a single rookie.
And now Clark comes up with a steal. Clark thought about pulling up from three.
To drive meaningful interest. and it had developed no obvious strategy for what to do when that rookie was not participating. The uncomfortable truth demanded honest reckoning. Either the league would learn to leverage star power by welcoming the audiences those stars attracted and converting temporary interest into lasting fandom, or it would continue resenting its own success, alienating the fans it desperately needed, and watching empty seats multiply whenever its biggest draw was absent. The finals provided the answer nobody in leadership wanted to hear. The question now was whether institutional pride would allow them to accept that answer and adapt accordingly, or whether they would repeat the same mistakes until the opportunity for growth disappeared entirely and the empty arenas became permanent rather than temporary embarrassments. The empty seats tell a story the league cannot ignore, a story of missed opportunities, of momentum tied to a single player, and of a fan base the WNBA risked alienating at its own peril. Caitlin Clark changed the game, but the finals revealed how fragile that change truly is. Will the league finally build on the audiences she created, or will it cling to old ways until the spotlight fades entirely? The next chapter is already unfolding, and everyone watching knows one truth. In a league where one player can move mountains, the question isn't if change will happen, but who will survive it.